You're listening to The Steven Tauriello Show, building a platform of liberty for people in search of truth with a dash of hope and a life worth living. The Steven Tauriello Show. And now, here's Steven.
So I was watching the most recent Tucker Carlson interview with RFK Jr. And man, this guy, I know people are probably like, man, Steven, you turning into an RFK fanboy. It's not really that I'm a huge fan of RFK. What I am a fan of is I just want to see America unified. And not just that, but I have to admire RFK Jr. for having not just the courage to come out, but the will to change his mind. I think it's hard for people to understand how difficult it is to get someone to change their mind. I know this because as a former drug addict, it's very similar because as a drug addict, you will only change when you want to change. And this is something that I had to learn the hard way. And they will only change when they hit rock bottom. You've heard that phrase before. Well, it's not when they hit rock bottom. It's not the hard times necessarily that make them want to change. It's when they're in those hard times, do they find the will to want to change. And only then will they find the will to help themselves. And so it's very similar to changing your mind when it comes to politics, when it comes to the way you perceive somebody or something. It's very difficult. And only that person can do it for themselves. There's no amount of talking. There's no amount of convincing. A lot of times you'll hear stories about when people open their eyes. For me, I would have to say it was Barack Obama. Barack Obama, when I voted for him, I was like, oh, great, man, this guy's going to give us, hope and change. He's going to, for the, first time, we're going to have somebody that actually cares about the middle class and cares about the people. And then he started bombing people. And then he turned into the same thing everybody else turns into. And so that really opened my eyes. It's like, what's the point? And so the next election, 2012, comes around, and I think it was McCain and Obama. I can't remember. Was it Romney and Obama? I can't remember. But I didn't vote at all. And then Donald Trump came around, and I think that's when I really, at first I'm like, this guy's a joke, man. Like, I didn't really know him. Obviously, we've all heard of Donald Trump. We've seen him in movies. We've seen him with Snoop Dogg and music videos and wrestling. He was like some rich billionaire real estate mogul from New York. It's like, okay. And then I started listening to him. And then he started saying things that we started saying, that we started talking about amongst one another. When he started saying, they're flooding this country with millions of illegal immigrants and giving them welfare and incentivizing them to stay. And the system is rigged against you. And when he had that debate with Hillary Clinton, when they were talking about the tax cuts, and when he called Hillary Clinton out on stage and said, I used the same tax loopholes that all your friends do. And the reason why you've been in government for 30 years and haven't changed those tax codes is because you use them too. And so do all your friends. And I'm like, damn, this guy just called out everybody. Called out the entire establishment on national TV live. And that's when I knew this guy was something different. This was not normal. This wasn't a normal candidate. This wasn't a normal politician. And I think that's one of the reasons why they hate him. The elite class hate him because he's a turncoat to the elites. And they want to see him destroyed. This is why both sides want to see Donald Trump gone. Because he's a threat to their system, to this corrupt temple that they built for themselves. And only they have the keys. and you're either on the in or you're on the out. And you can only be invited into their system, into this little corrupt club that they have. And so that's when I realized it. But no one was going to convince me. There's nobody right now that can convince me that Kamala Harris is going to make a good president. There's no way. The only way I would be able to change my mind is if I went in, did the research, and found it myself. And I actually found the will to believe it. But folks, I do research on this stuff all day, every day. If I ain't seen it yet, it's not there. But that's the thing. And RFK, this is why I admire him. Because he found the will to change his mind. That is very difficult to do. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that. I don't think RFK Jr. changed his mind about his party because of any type of incentive. I don't think he was incentivized to do it. I don't think he gets anything out of it. Obviously, his entire family has come out against him. His wife doesn't even agree with him endorsing Donald Trump. So he's not getting anything out of this. And this is how you know a true leader. RFK Jr. is a true leader. Is when you are willing to do what you know is right beyond what people think about you. And RFK Jr. is putting this country before the elites because he could have not said anything. He could have not endorsed Donald Trump. He could have endorsed Kamala Harris and just went with the flow, went with the program. But in his mind, he knows that the Democratic Party is bad for this country. It is not the same party that him, his father, and his uncle grew up with. It's just not. This is what I noticed too. It's just not. When Democrats like Hillary Clinton started coming on board talking about war and the warmongering, the Democratic Party has always been anti-war. And that's something RFK Jr. says in this video we're getting ready to show. And you know what? Why don't we just go ahead and show it now? I'm just going to go ahead and play the video now. And then if I stop it, we'll talk about it if there's a good spot to stop on. Here, check this out.
You know, one of the things that my uncle and father were always thinking about is how do we look to the rest of the world, right? They were conscious that America was the template for democracy. When we created a modern democracy in 1789 or 1791, when the Bill of Rights was ratified, we were the only democracy on earth. By 1865, during the end of the Civil War, there were 5, and they were all modeled on America. Mm-hmm. And by the time my uncle took office, there was about 150, and by the end of the 60s, there's 190. They're all based on American model.
Yep.
And, you know, we very much were the exemplary nation. We were the example of democracy around the globe. Everything that they did, they were conscious that they were being watched. What does the rest of the world think of American democracy right now? That, you know, that we have in one party selected a man with dementia to lead the free world, and then turned around and picked a person, a woman who cannot give an interview. She cannot defend her vision or America's record in the world. And then she gave this, you know, Vice President Harris gave this speech at the convention that was written by neocons. And they had CIA directors talking at the Democratic Convention, military people talking at the Democratic Convention. My father and my uncle were the party of anti-war. My uncle was asked by his best friend, Ben Bradley, one of his 2 best friends who ran the Washington Post, what do you want on your gravestone, your epitaph? And my uncle said immediately, he kept the peace. He said the primary job of a president of the United States was to keep the country out of war.
Yep.
He said he didn't want children in Africa and Latin America and Asia, when they heard about the United States of America, to think of a man with a gun. They wanted them to think of a Peace Corps volunteer and the Alliance for Progress and USAID. which were programs that he created to build the middle class, to end run the oligarchs, end run the military juntas that used to receive U.S. aid, and instead go directly to the poor and build institutions, education and health and all.
Now maybe you're starting to see why the CIA may have had something to do with RFK's assassination. This is where a lot of the people were coming from, because when you dig down into that story, it gets deep, folks. It gets deep. It was a lot to do with the Bay of Pigs. It was a lot to do with the anti-war mindset of RFK, his uncle. And this is why people believe that the CIA had a lot to do with the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. All right, here we go.
All of the institutions of democracy to continue to model it for the rest of the world and live up to what we're supposed to be doing, which is to encourage the growth of democratic rule. So now we have a system that's produced people who, a candidate in the Democratic Party who can't even defend America's record in the world, and who is parroting this kind of warmongering, military domination ideology that's gotten us in such trouble. It's caused a calamity in our country. It's gutted the middle class. It's made us a pariah around the globe. It led to the rise of BRICS. It's leading to the rise of totalitarianism all over the world. And, I'd say this finally, that
and he's not joking there. We're starting to see this type of censorship mentality breaking out all across the globe. They say the United States is the beacon on the hill. And when the United States coughs, the rest of the world has a cold. Is because, just like he said, the Revolutionary War was a turning point not just in America, but in the entire world. All these different countries seen us as that beacon on the hill. They followed us. They created their own democracies with their own constitutions. And ours, as of right now, I do believe is the longest living one. But I'm starting to see this trend like in the UK, like in Germany, like in Brazil now, with the massive censorship. And ladies and gentlemen, censorship turns into totalitarianism. Totalitarianism turns into communism. Communism turns into death and destruction. And then the cycle repeats. That's how it is, and he's not wrong. There is this weird censorship wave crossing all across the globe right now. And it's not good. It never turns out good. All right, here we go.
If you really look at what's happening in the Democratic Party today, it's a party that the word demos in Greek means people. But it's a party that's lost faith in the people. It's a party that needs ironclad control. So They didn't trust anybody to have a real election. They got rid of the primaries because they didn't trust the people. They then handpicked Vice President Harris with no election, no even pretense of election, because they didn't trust the people. And, they're the party now of censorship.
Mm-hmm.
And
how can you have a democracy with censorship?
You cannot have a democracy. They're absolutely incompatible. And everybody knew that. Everybody, you and I were raised reading Orwell and Aldous Huxley and Robert Heinlein and
these books here.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn and all of these other books that were part of classical literature that was taught in every American classroom. It said the first step to totalitarianism begins with censorship. It's the first step down that slippery slope. And there's no time that we look back in history and say the people who were censoring speech were the good guys. They're always the bad guys, because we know that they're the guys who are going to end up cracking the whip on us all and being our overlords.
Yeah. Yeah, folks, this is, and I said this a couple weeks ago, the United States has become the #1 exporter of bad ideas. And I see this type of censorship regime all across the globe. And nowhere in our world's history has censorship led to anything good. And nowhere in our world's history has the people conducting the censorship been the good guys, ever. Anybody that conducts in censorship is always the bad guys. And this is what concerns me so much about the Trump derangement syndrome, where the media has somehow convinced people to hate Trump more than they love their own country. And it's kind of blinded them from what is happening. This is how democracy dies in broad daylight. Not in the night, not in the dark. It's dying in broad daylight. People are actually supporting this. There was a poll, there was a study done from Real Clear Politics that 70% of Democrats support mass government censorship. You have Matt Taibbi with the Twitter files. For the first time, you had a social media platform interfere in a federal election by manipulating the social media companies to censor dissenting opinions and speech, all in order to win power. This is why Democrats are targeting younger and younger voters, is because you see these people like RFK, like myself, like Tulsi Gabbard, they're leaving the party. The only people that are joining the Democratic Party are young voters. This is why Democrats want to lower the age to 16 to vote. This is why they're bringing in tens of millions of illegal immigrants. It's fresh, new voters. The Democrat Party has been losing voters for a long time because of this reason right here. And never has the Democratic Party been so blatant about censorship, about rigging primaries. There was literally no votes for the presidential nominee that's running for the president right now. Not one vote. It's never happened. Nobody knows who's running our country right now. This flies in the face of the framers of all of our founding documents to not have a single person that is visible to the people that's running this country. There was a discussion in the Federalist Papers between Alexander Hamilton, and he was talking about why our constitutional republic should be, more specifically the executive branch, should be one person, not a plurality, because there was this argument that was being made that there should be a magistrate or a plurality, which means like more than one, like a bench of judges or like 3 or 4 people ahead of the executive branch. And Alexander Hamilton was arguing why it should just be one. And there's multiple reasons, but there was a couple main reasons. One is so that the one person can be visible to the people, so that that one person is held accountable, so that anything that goes wrong, people know who to blame. People know where to look. People know who's running their executive branch, which is equal powers, the other 2 branches. But it's the only branch that has just one. And that was designed that way. It was specific. But right now, we have no idea who's running our country. And so, like I said, it flies in the face of everything we've known to be in a constitutional republic. And they don't care. You have the majority of the party that supports mass government censorship, and they don't care. You have a party that bypassed the primary process, and they don't care. Like, all these things are happening, but they don't care because they're blinded by hate of Donald Trump. Who needs policies when you have Donald Trump to hate? Kamala Harris isn't coming out with any policies. They're not sharing their ideas. Is because their only policy is just to hate Donald Trump. They feel like if they can get by, if they can get elected with just the pure hatred of Donald Trump, which means everybody voting against Donald Trump, not for any policies, then that pretty much gives them the mandate to do whatever they want. Because the way they see it is that if they get elected, then that tells them that the American people don't really care about the policies that are being implemented in the country. So they'll just use that. They'll just say, hey, look, we never said we were or weren't going to stack the Supreme Court. We never said we weren't going to end the filibuster, and you voted for us, so That's what we're doing. Like this is so dangerous, man. The way that the Democratic Party is running their elections, is running our government. We don't know who's running our country. I mean, is it Kamala Harris? Is it Blinken? Is it Jake Sullivan? We don't know. Is it Obama? This is exactly why the framers said one person should be in charge of the executive branch, is so that there is accountability, so that there's transparency. Like, we have no idea. It's so shocking to me. And like I said in the beginning, I admire RFK Jr. because he actually had the will to come out and change his mind about the Democratic Party. Tulsi Gabbard the same way. I don't see them as having incentives. I was talking to my wife earlier about RFK Jr. still being a Democrat. He is. He still is a Democrat. There's no doubt about it. And I would love to see RFK Jr. run as a real, sane Democrat, old school Democrat. I don't know what these people are now, but it's not the Democrat Party I was a part of. And it's not the Democrat Party that RFK Jr. was a part of, or Tulsi Gabbard was a part of. Tulsi Gabbard was the vice chair of the DNC. And when you have a party that supports war now, like when is the last time the Democratic Party was talked about pro-war, sending jets and bombs over to Ukraine? It's like, they've literally turned into everything they claim to hate. It's like Harvey Dent in The Black Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself as the villain. That's the Democrat Party, man. These people, I'm telling you, unless they make a change, they're going to go the way of the Whigs. And I know a lot of people are talking about the Republican Party changing. Yeah, I would say it probably has. It's turned into the party for the people. It's turned into the party for the middle class. It's turned into the party of anti-corporation, anti-war, anti-Big Pharma. It's pretty much turned into what the Democrats used to be, anti-establishment. We were talking about this last time with the horseshoe theory, on how the bottom of the horseshoe, you have the far right and the far left, and they're actually closer and share more commonalities than the right and the left, the widest part of the horseshoe. And this is how. It's just like this. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge fanboy of RFK Jr. I just admire the man's courage to come out and find the will to change, because getting people to change their mind is extremely hard. This is why Democrats play on people's emotions. It was Winston Churchill that said, if you're 20 years old and not a liberal, then you don't have a heart. If you're 50 years old and not a conservative, then you don't have a brain. It's so true, man. This is how Democrats always manage to recruit new party members, how they recruit new voters, is by finding younger and younger voters. Why? Because younger people don't have the wisdom or the experience. They don't know what it's like to raise a family with high taxes. They don't know what it's like to run a business. They don't know what it's like to sign the front of a check instead of the back of the check. So, this is why they prey on younger voters, is because, just like me, is they're young and dumb. They're young and influential. And so this is how the Democratic Party has found their way to stay a party, to stay relevant, to stay in the system. But what happens when the younger people start catching on? This is why they don't teach the common literature back here in the books that RFK Jr. was talking about. But they don't teach these books in history anymore. They don't read George Orwell's 1984, because it would terrify young Democrats to know that it's their party that's acting like Big Brother, talking about memory holding stuff. Which party wants to erase history? Which party is trying to knock down statues? Which party is trying to change, the labels of pancake syrup? Which party is trying to erase our history with things like the 1619 Project? There was something Dennis Prager once said, and I'll never forget it, but he said, if you ever want to figure out which side is lying, just figure out which side is trying to censor people. That's so true, man, when you really think about it. So if you ever want to know, if you're ever in a situation you don't really know which side is lying, because it does get to that point where you just don't know who's lying, just figure out which side is trying to censor people. That's how you know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to share that video with you. I just wanted to do a quick little video, kind of a reaction video of RFK Jr. in the interview with Tucker Carlson. It is a must-watch interview. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's amazing. Listen, I think the coalition that's building between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, I think this is an amazing coalition. I think this is an historic time in this country's history. I think this has the potential to be one of the most historic administrations in U.S. history. When you have a true coalition government, where you have Democrats, Republicans coming together, sane, rational Democrats, you know, the old school ones that are anti-war, that are anti-Big Pharma, anti-corporations, but they can't be that right now because that's how they get funding. That's why these media outlets are such in the bag for Democrats all the time, is because the media outlets are paid by Big Pharma. Some of their biggest sponsorships, like Pfizer. If you're watching the commercials, you'll see Pfizer commercials. That's because it's all one gigantic system, folks. They don't want anything to do with, and they do not want them having the keys to the castle. This is what makes Donald Trump so appealing to people. This is also what makes Donald Trump such a threat to that same system. You look at, CNN, and which is, trust me, it gets deeper. You got Comcast, AT&T, Fox. You got there's only like 6 companies that own all of the media, and I'm talking newspapers, websites, and broadcast media. Comcast is one of the biggest. But you look at the money, it's all coming from the pharmaceutical companies. Same thing with the healthcare industry. The chemicals that they put in our foods. Because why? Because the chemicals they put in our foods keeps us reliably sick. Keeps us reliably sick so that we could always have to, what? Go to the doctors and get put on what? Medicine. Now you see. It's one big giant scam. And all of us are getting duped in this scam. And I think people are starting to wake up. At least I hope they are. This is why they see alternative media as such a big threat. They call it conspiracy theorists until it's just a conspiracy 6 months later or a year later. But anyways, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you stay tuned to the next episode. I actually want to talk about the censorship that's going on with Elon Musk in Brazil. Brazil is going through some mass Twitter war going on. And you have some people here in America talking about Brazil arresting Elon Musk. This is what it's come to. This is how desperate these people are to censor the other side. Remember what I told you about trying to figure out which side is lying? There you go. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you smash that like button. If you want to support the podcast, please download the podcast anywhere podcasts are found, the audio-only version, obviously. If you want to help the video platform, subscribe, and most of all, share this episode with your friends and family. And I will talk to you guys here in a little bit. God bless you, God bless America, and long live the Republic. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.